like probably the year they brought me back, because it was seasonal work. So I came back the next year, and I was more interested in knowing more about what was going on in the fields than I was just hanging out in the store, which also has its perks. So a lot of customer service, which is fun, and selling produce and getting to know it in that regard. But I was curious about the back end stuff. So I kind of got involved in the seeding, planting, harvesting, washing, packing that next year. So that would have been 2012. And then during that time, I also got a job as a produce clerk at the new Tacoma Co-op that was on 6th Ave in a really tiny little brick and mortar shop that unfortunately closed down a few years later. But I did both. So I started working in the fields at Terry's Berries and sold product at the co-op, and kind of had this weird relationship with the produce I was harvesting and then selling it to myself at the co-op. But it was fun, and it was like not weird or taboo at all. Not to give you that impression, but it was good. It was fun. It was like kind of cool to have that relationship too, with that literal like farm to customer. Like I was the person who was like growing it, harvesting, and then selling it to the customer, if that makes sense. So it wasn't like, anyway, that's maybe too much detail. But then in 2015, a farmer that Terry had worked with previously, he was ready to retire and kind of move on to something else. So he had a pre-existing blueberry business in Algona Pacific, with a whole line of customers and bushes that were already planted, and a shed and a processing line and all that. So he also was willing to carry the note. And so it was kind of an offer I couldn't really refuse, that it was an opportunity that I obviously had this green thumb that I wasn't really aware of until, well, how old was I, 19? Anyway, so I was lucky enough to purchase it, and I've owned it since then. It's really challenging work, but I love it a lot. And to go back to the co-op world, the co-op that I had worked for on 6th Ave closed down in 2016, and we had merged with Central Co-op. So they brought me on as the produce manager at the Seattle store. So I ran that produce department for about 2.5 years or so. And I continued to work with Amy and Farmland's Farm, and buying their product there as much as I possibly could. They were so gracious to deliver up to Seattle for us, which was amazing. And I'm sure she'll get into that stuff later, or we will. Anyway, so yeah, during all that time, so yeah, the last 7-8 years, that's my produce experience in terms of owning a farm and buying produce, and kind of seeing both sides of having to put the shelf on the product to sell to the larger public, and also growing the product to sell to the people who are putting it on the shelf for the larger public. Yeah.
Cool. Thanks, Shelby. And I forgot that was in 2011 that we worked together there. Longer ago than I thought. Okay, so I would kind of like to go and do some introductions. And I also want to point out to everyone that we're recording this. And so we want to get to know your name, your farm name, and what is your definition of wholesale, because I have a feeling that we're going to have a lot of different definitions of what wholesaling means to different people. So in order to make this as less awkward as possible, I have a list of names here of people logged in, so I will just call your name, and that will be your turn to introduce yourself. And if you want to pass, then you can just pass. That's no big deal. So we'll start with Amanda.
You're going to have to unmute yourself when she says your name. We can't hear you, Amanda. Might have to move down the line.
Okay. Okay, how about Barbara?
Barbara, can you unmute yourself and introduce yourself? I don't know how to tell people how to do it on a phone.
I think that whoever is hosting this should be able to unmute them too.
Okay, Okay, so Barbara, I'll unmute you.
Well,
Oh, you did it yourself.
yeah, my name is Stacy. I'm Barbara's sister, and she's on another conference call, similar stuff. So I'm gonna sit in and just listen, and we're representing Farmstead.
Great, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, Chris Iberly.
Hey, this is Chris Iberly from Washington State's Department of Agriculture Regional Markets. I mostly work on farm to school, and yeah, just here to listen and learn.
Thanks, Chris. Chris?
Hi, I'm Chris, Windy Acre Farm from Kent. Here mostly to learn about the jump from growing on 2 acres for farmers markets to getting to a scale that makes sense of wholesaling to primarily restaurants and other small distributors.
Okay, great, thank you. Claire? Okay, maybe Claire's gonna pass. How about Claudia?
Hi, Claudia Fry with Fry Family Farm. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, hi, Claudia.
Thanks for hosting today. I'm interested in developing our business into more restaurants and then other, I would say probably small wholesale venues as well. And then trying to figure out how to do pricing, particularly for wholesale interests me. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Liz?
I'm Liz Clark. I work for King Conservation District as a project coordinator for the engagement team, and I run Enumclaw Plateau Farmers Market out here on the plateau. I'm just hoping to be able to support the farmers that are at our market and others around King County.
Cool, thank you. Eric?
This isn't a real interesting. Huge. Oh, there we go. Hi, my name is Eric Terrell. I'm also here with my wife, Willow Mary Moon. We are one whole farm out here in Rapid City, South Dakota, potentially moving out to y'all's area. So very excited to see that you do this. So that's always exciting. And as far as the definition of wholesale, we were approached by actually a couple of the casino restaurants out here to that are interested in using locally sourced organic or better than organic food. So that's what we focus on. So we've been working farmers markets and various things like that, slowly expanding. We currently lease our land and I'm looking to hopefully own at some point. But we've been farming individually for about 50 years collectively. So 30 for me and 20 for her. So it's, we're really excited to kind of find out what you guys have to offer. But yeah, wholesale for us is selling to people that are then going to sell. So that's what we look at as wholesale.
Great, thanks. Harsha?
Hi, so I'm actually not, so I'm a student actually, and I go to the University of Massachusetts. I'm a student entrepreneur, and I'm working on an ag tech business that really works with farms, distributors, everyone within that chain. And so I was talking to Carrie West, who recommended me to get on this call to kind of learn a little bit more about that process. So I'm kind of just here to learn and see if I can tailor my product better to some of the needs or the processes that go on here.
Great, thank you.
Everybody's introducing themselves.
Monica?
We're 15 minutes in.
Make sure you mute yourselves if you're not speaking because we can hear you.
Hello, I'm Monica, Twinkle Toes Farm in Enumclaw. I have company. I am just trying to, as some people are experiencing some fears about market security, trying to figure out if this is an outlet that might work for me or not. So yeah, that's why I'm here.
Okay. And Venice.
Hey guys, I'm Venice, Simple Goodness Farm, and we do a value-added product. So we already wholesale, but we're looking at a distributor, a pretty big distributor. And so I'm interested just to kind of see the flip side, because I've also been approached by Charlie's Produce about selling herbs wholesale, and I have zero experience with selling a raw product wholesale because we usually put it in a bottle and sell it that way. So.
All right, thanks, Venice. I see Emily has joined. Emily, do you want to give your name, your farm name, and what your definition of wholesale is?
Hi, I guess my name is Emily Zun, and I guess we have local color farm and fiber. So I guess I know this is a produce focused workshop, but in addition to like market veggies, we also sell a lot of yarn, which that's what I mostly wholesale, I guess. And so sort of interested in I guess so right now all the wholesale that I do the distribution of, and what's it like to work with a distributor, I guess would be oh wait, I guess that's not the question. What is my definition of wholesale?
That's okay, anything's fine.
Okay, yeah, so I guess just selling to someone who's not the direct end consumer, I guess. Yeah.
Okay.
So, thanks.
Cool. Thank you. And have I missed someone? Okay. All right. So this slide is the different levels of wholesaling, and this is just for our specific farm. So everybody is going to have their own, just their own experience working in wholesale. There's some things that are similar, but there's some things that are going to be different. So just look at my presentation, the things I say, just is from the perspective of just my personal perspective. So grain of salt kind of thing. So this is the different levels that we have on our farm. So I consider a small wholesale account somebody that's a specialty restaurant that just is going to order a few cases of something every week, maybe sporadically. And then that's about the amount of money that I can count on in sales for them each week. A small retail wholesaler, small retail reseller is going to be some of the, is going to be some of the fruit stands, really small stores like Shelby mentioned when she was first starting out, that kind of thing would be maybe $100 to $500 on the top end a week, depending on the month. Mid-sized grocers and event venues, again, $350 to $1,500 a week. Other CSAs, I don't do that too often, but it's great. It's one of my favorite accounts when they do happen. So CSAs that will supplement what they have offering from other farms. Sometimes you can find a CSA that will do this on the regular, and some other ones just need it to fill in some gaps in their spring or something like that. But CSAs are great to get a relationship with, because you can sell them all kinds of things that you could never sell to a grocer or another reseller. And then the larger grocers and distributors, we do about $2,000 to $15,000 a week with them, depending on, again, on the time of year. But with these folks, there's a lot more standardization, and you need food safety and insurance requirements for that as well. So Shelby, what are your different levels at your Sunrise Farm?
Yeah. We do other CSAs. So I don't have a CSA. I work with Wild Terra Organic Farm now, what was previously known as Terry's Berries in the Puyallup Valley. And I work with them. I probably deliver probably about 400 pounds a month to them, and then they repackage the blueberries as they wish and put them in their CSA. And then I direct sell to consumers. So I have a customer base of about 300 folks who like to have frozen blueberries in their freezer over the winter time to put in their smoothies or on top of their granola, or whatever else, baking, pies, stuff like that. And then I also work with a pastry distributor in Seattle. So I guess I'm trying to think of what category they would fit into. I guess maybe a small retail reseller, even though they're producing it and making it into something else. And then I also sell to mid-sized grocers. Marlene's Market and Deli in Federal Way in Tacoma, they buy for their delis for their smoothies that they have. So yeah, those are the levels. And then of course people can come to the farm and get a couple of pounds here and there too if they like. But yeah, does that answer your question? Or does that?
Thank you.
Any questions about that? No? Okay.
Yeah, and I do want to invite people, if they have questions, if you're in front of a desktop, or laptop, you can type in your question in the chat, and Misha will help to facilitate that. So please feel free to participate, because we want to give you guys the information that you're looking for. Which brings us to the next level, which is the price points. And I think a lot of folks are interested in this. So this is going to be interesting because Shelby was my buyer for a while, and I have no idea how buyers determine the price points. I only know how I determine my price, and so I cannot wait to hear what Shelby has to say. I've been wondering for like 20 years how this works, and so I'm excited about this.
Uh-oh. Giving away trade secrets here.
Yeah. Well, it's good to know. So, I'm going to go back to the other slide because my price is different it depends on who I'm selling it to. And it's not because of, I'm playing favorites or anything like that. It has more to do with volume and logistics of getting the product to the person. So the larger distributors are the people that I get the absolute lowest price from. So let's go with a case of kale. We sell a lot of cases of kale. The standard case is 24 bunches. We're going to sell, 200 cases of green kale every time Charlie's comes and picks it up. And they're going to pay us maybe, depending on the time of year, average $22 for that case. But if I sell it to basically any other of those accounts, I'm going to be selling it for closer to $30 to $35 a case. And I'm only going to sell 3 cases of it tops, but I'm going to have to deliver it. And so it's just about scale on that at that point. I see some chats coming up. Misha, do we have anything to address at this time? No.
No, people are giving me email addresses. Thank you.
Okay, sweet. And so it's really hard for me to It's really hard for me to determine pricing. The only way that I do it, and this is my insider information, is that I score a price sheet from one of the larger distributor, and I see what other retailers or other people are buying it from them for, and I kind of set my prices in that way. So for the Charlie's Produce, I don't get to choose. They just tell me how much they're going to pay for it, and I can choose whether or not I want to sell my stuff to them or not. But for everybody else, I send out a weekly price sheet based on that distributor's price list that I have to ask for favors from my friends that get it sent to them from, basically. Or I'll ask somebody that I have a good relationship with, like, you know, a buyer, like maybe I have a good relationship with Shelby, I'm like, hey, what's it going for? But that's a tricky question because you can say that and they might lowball you. So you have to be really careful with that.
Sure.
Is that so funny, Shelby?
I would never do that, Amy. I would never do that.
But then and one thing I've noticed that also if I'm trying to move a product or if I'm really trying to get an account to pay attention to me, if they're not paying attention to me, then I'll try to negotiate on the price. And usually that will help to get a response from people that I'm surprised that I'm not getting a response from. So Shelby, let's hear how you determine pricing.
Oh, as a buyer or as a farmer?
As a buyer.
So basically, if you purchase a product, more likely than not, the buyer is going to put a 35 to 40% margin on top of that item. And there's a couple different layers to that as well. So like specialty items, like let's say specialty mushrooms or something like that, the buyer is likely going to put an extra margin on there. So maybe like 45 to 50%. And the idea around that is to account for loss, because the product is going to be sitting on the shelf. I mean, of course, ideally not. Obviously, we are selling out of product, you know, at the end of each day and then getting new deliveries, but that's unfortunately not the reality. So a lot of the times you're going to hold on to some product for two days, and if you're a slower grocery store, it's going to be more like a week, maybe a week and a half. And then, of course,
Shelby, I'm going to jump in here really quick and ask Claudia to please mute your phone.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you.
So the price point on specialty items will be a little bit higher, so the margin is going to be a little bit more to account for any sort of loss on the product. And sale priced items are going to be, well, anything that a buyer might want to put on sale. Obviously, they're going to drop the price a little bit, and that the idea around that is for the customer to purchase more of that item. So I think Amy might have mentioned it earlier that that's going to be something that people are trying to negotiate. Like, hey, I've got, like, if you buy 3 cases of Lawson kale, I'll give them to you for $25 a piece. And then the buyer is like, oh, okay, great. I could put that on sale for 2 for $4 or 2 for $5 or something like that. And then the idea is that the customer buys 2 or 4 or in those larger quantities. So then you can purchase more of that product from the farmer and the customer is purchasing it from you. So you don't have that loss. Commodity items. So like high penetration for household items, carrots, apples, greens, lettuce, celery, those types of things. Those are going to be in your like lower range, 35%, because those are the basics items that customers are always going to purchase. So a lot of the times grocers might take a little hit on that margin because they don't want their customers to feel like their store or their department is too expensive. Most of my buying is around cooperatives, and cooperatives already kind of have an exclusivity kind of feel to them. So in order to get our customers to come back, we like to stay competitive with Safeway or those really, really large grocers that Amy was referring to that are buying, you know, those cases of Lawson kale for $22 a week or whatever. And they're buying them for $22 a week because they're buying in such large quantities, so they can afford to kind of buy lots and lots and lots, as opposed to a smaller grocer who can buy, you know, $500 a week. And that's like kind of all of that. Like one order might be $500 if it's a smaller store. But in order to kind of help customers to come back and not think that the grocery store is too expensive, they'll take a little hit on the margin. So it'll be like 35% more on top of any of those basics items, if that makes sense.
Shelby, how would you say to start determining what your prices are?
I look at my competitors. So I would say that like big box stores, Safeway and stuff like that, are really going to determine the price of the market that people are buying their groceries for. So I use something called Instacart so I don't travel to different stores. I might if I wanted to see kind of what they were like putting on sale or what the new trend is going to be. But I look on Instacart and kind of see what their prices are for some things, and then I kind of go from there.
Okay, so that would mean from a farmer's perspective, if you didn't have that cheat sheet that I always use, so folks could kind of use that same Instacart, see what things are going for, and then do the math. You said you do them like a 30 to 50% markup. Is that what you said?
Yeah, it's 30. Well, it depends on the item. So 35 to 40 on any like basic products, high household penetration items, people that like every time you go to the grocery store, you're going to buy apples, carrots, bananas, stuff like that. And then anything specialty will be probably 45 to 50%. And that would be like chanterelle mushrooms or purple radishes or Savoy cabbage, that type of stuff.
I have a couple questions coming in from the chat. So Eric is asking, we get to adjust up for organic and locally grown. Yes. And so I think that's a good question for Amy with being certified organic. How do you adjust your pricing based on that?
I've never been in the non-organic market, so there's no price adjustment for me. It just is that I don't really think I have anything helpful on that side of things. Shelby, do you?
Yeah, certainly. I have only very little experience buying conventional product or something grown to organic standards, just in the nature of my experience with local grocers and co-ops. They typically only purchase the organic stuff. But I have seen and worked with some conventional products, and absolutely there is a premium on organic stuff, sure.
It seems like, of course, Eric is joining us from South Dakota, and they might be a little bit behind in terms of organic dominance in the marketplace compared to
Sure.
Seattle, the region. Liz Clark is asking, does anyone cost out using an enterprise budget to know your costs versus just going off of kind of what everybody else around you is charging? Amy, do you guys do enterprise budgets?
Not out of definition, no, but we do know our costs. So, I mean, we basically know our costs. The biggest one that's that causes the most headache is just the boxes. So we're paying about $3 for every 24 bunches of something just for the box alone. And then, of course, all of the labor that is involved in growing the crop. So yes, Liz, enterprise budget, of course, is the way to go on that. But yeah, definitely know your costs. That's a whole different, that's a whole nother can of worms. And we'll touch on that a little bit when we touch on production planning. But it is one of the most important things to consider, is that if you're lowballing yourself just to get the crop out the door, you don't want to do that unless it's just the last ditch effort. You're going to punt it. So yeah.
And Chris has a question that I think is really indicative of the challenge for somebody who's a direct to consumer to start thinking differently about pricing. So he says, if I sell lettuce for $2 each, so you would mark that down 35% for wholesale per item. But I guess in my mind, you're not really you're not pricing things by item at all when you're wholesaling, right?
I mean, yes and no. So without doing math is not my strong point in my head, but about $1 and some change for a head of lettuce. Yeah, that's a good price. I'd sell it for that. I'd say that's fairly accurate. Yeah. So, I mean, that's kind of a painful part that a lot of folks that are used to doing direct market have to grapple with, is just the completely different in price. So if I'm going to sell something at a farmer's market, or if I'm going to price it out for a CSA, I'm probably going to get 3 times as much amount for that item, for that bunch of carrots or that head of lettuce, that I would wholesale. But then I don't have to do any marketing. So again, with the enterprise budget, then it's the cost of production thing. So yeah.
I also think too, there's something to be said about the relationship between the farmer and the buyer as well. So like if I was managing a produce department and a local farm was like, hey, I've got this really beautiful red magenta lettuce. It's fresh. I'm going to cut it today. I want to sell it for $2 a head. Then I might think back and be like, okay, cool. Can I feasibly as a buyer sell this lettuce for maybe $2.99 a head or $2.79 or whatever that math is? And then if I can, then for sure I will probably be like, yeah, let's do it. Especially if, you know, you're like the localist the most local farm, or you're the only one that has that lettuce, or you have like that last shot local thing that I can like really push that marketing for you, for the customers so that they want to buy your lettuce at, you know, maybe heck, $3.99 each or whatever. Maybe you come in and do a demo and you're like, here, sample this red magenta lettuce. It's $4 a pop, but like, here I am, the farmer in front of you, get to know the face that grew it and harvested it and all that, if that makes sense. Just a little zhuzh on that.
It's a good tip.
Section.
Yeah. Anything else you want to add for pricing right now, Shelby?
Can I ask a really quick question?
Absolutely.
This is Denise, and it's a really long one, so I'm having a hard time typing it. Amy, Charlie's is a distributor, right? So they, like, you sell it to Charlie's, Charlie sells it to Safeway, Safeway sells it to the end customer, yeah?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
so
I have no idea who they sell to. But,
I'm imagining that there's like a percentage, an extra percentage, which is why you just charge the case price, because they've already worked all of that out. Do you work with any other distributors other than Charlie's?
Not really. You know, every now and then I might offload some extra stuff to OGC, but that's about it. I mean, it's very minimal. It's minimal.
And then do you know where they sell it ever?
No. I think that's, you know, and that kind of gets into relationships and things like, they keep that information close, you know, because it is everybody's. If I knew that, I could just go straight to that, whoever they're selling it to, potentially. I remember one time I was pretty close with my buyer at Charlie's, and I mentioned to her that I was so excited to see my Charlie's product at the Central Co-op, and she said, Amy, don't ever tell me that again. Like, that I was at the Central Co-op dropping something off directly. She's like, just to hear a tip for you, Amy, don't tell me that anymore. Because she didn't, you know, it's a competition, you know.
That's my other question, is that in the specialty food market, we often have to sign exclusives with distributors, and basically saying that, like, we will only work with one distributor in the Pacific Northwest. And I'm wondering if that's something that is common, or if you've ever seen that.
At our scale, you know, we're still considered pretty small. Like, we're not into the Safeways and that of the world. And so we have not signed anything with anyone. And at the same time, you know, that gives us freedom to do what we please, but also there's no guarantees that they're going to buy what they say they're going to. So it's an all around risky situation.
May I say something?
Yeah.
In regards to that, sorry. I remember at smaller grocers, like at a co-op, they want to know the story of the person who's producing the product. So I contacted several farmers asking what can Central Co-op purchase from you that only Central Co-op will have, and that really is they want the backstory. They want to be able to market. They want to be able to tell their customers, whether it be restaurants, grocery stores, Whole Foods, Mazatlan, Mexican restaurant, whatever. They want to be able to be like, yep, you can only get this product from us. And there's pros and cons to that. Again, Amy's mentioned marketing, because you don't have to do any. You basically just have to tell them the information and sell the product, and they do the rest for you. And then all of a sudden there's a bunch of faces out there that know your farm and they know your product. So I would recommend kind of exploring that if you're interested there, because it is kind of cool to have a grocery store or a restaurant or something that really does market your story, and really does have that exclusive item, because it's good for you and them, but also you don't quite have the freedom to sell that same thing at maybe more expensive price to a different place.
Can you dive
But
into
just
that a little bit more?
yeah,
Because
yeah.
I'm thinking, like, from a farmer's perspective, is that something like you grew all this stuff and now you need to sell it, then you set up that exclusive relationship? Or is it, hey, I would like you to grow this specific crop for me, put the seeds in the ground now, I'll buy this many throughout the year? Because it's a lot easier for farmers to plan knowing ahead what they're going to sell and who they're going to sell it to, versus like, oh, you're the only person that I can sell these carrots to now, and that's all the carrots I have, or something like that.
Yeah, that's a great question, and also a good thing to think about as well. A lot of places will have farmer meetings, and they get together with farmers before the season starts, and that's when the buyer might be like, hey, I really want watermelon radish from you, and I want you to only sell it to us. Yeah, or the farmer might be like, I have black radish, and then I might be like, I'll buy 20 pounds a week if we will be the only ones who can buy that from you. Did that answer your question, Aisha?
Yeah, so it sounds like it could happen both ways.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it definitely does. And I think even for the bigger distributors, I have those conversations in December, and we talk about what they think they're going to buy from me per week. And I do have 1 or 2 crops that I grow exclusively. This is keep on your question, Venice, that I grow exclusively for them. However, there's nothing legal about it. And so it has happened once or twice that they are not buying everything that they had verbally committed to. And so once I try everything I can to sell it to them and they're still saying no, I'm like, okay, I'm going to offer it to somebody else, just FYI. And so I have to keep the relationship really, on top like that, so that there's no, just because it could get tricky if I don't. Like, I could definitely have to be upfront with them if I have a verbal commitment, but I've never signed anything. So, yeah. So now we're going into small versus large accounts. And so this can be from the buyer side of things perspective or from the farmer perspective. So Shelby, can you explain what your perspective is working with the smaller farm? So let's go with the smallest farm that you've worked with, what that's like, and the pros and cons perhaps, and maybe one of the larger farms that you work with and the pros and cons of that.
I'm gonna have to think back, because, well, I mean, sorry, I'm kind of drawing a blank here. Well, there's like a little something coming up, but that's not a fun little thing coming up. At some point, if a farmer cannot provide the amount of product that a store is looking for, at some point the store is going to move on and buy the product from somebody who has that quantity of product that they want to order. And really, because it just gets very confusing and challenging to always and forever be like, oh, 4 Elements Farm doesn't have green kale this week. Okay, well, let's look at wild hair. Great, they've got it. And then at some point that relationship kind of just builds. And there's like layers to that where, 4 Elements Farm would be like, hey, I'm over here, like, look at me, buy this product. And then, I might be like, as a buyer, like, well, I've been buying it from Wild Hair for a while, but I guess I can, stop buying it from Wild Hair and get it from 4 Elements Farm. But that's just kind of one thing that comes to mind if you're too small and you can't provide that quantity. And then with that too, depends on how large your account is. If it's smaller and you're small, then that's really going to be a symbiotic relationship, because that's going to make sense. If you're larger, then you have more capacity to deliver more product, so it can be continually fresh in the produce department. At Seattle, we got OGC and Charlie's delivered daily, 7 days a week, 3 to 4 pallets, especially over the weekend, maybe even up to 8 pallets on a Sunday from both of those distributors. And we would get local farms delivered to us as much as possible. So there's that. With that as well, I think about quality of product. So if a really small farm has the best tomatoes ever, but they can only deliver 20 pounds to me on Mondays, and that's it, that's all I got, and then I have to wait till the next week. Again, it's telling that story. It's marketing to my customers. Sure, it's only a little bit, but it's the best. They're the best, and let's support them and buy all of it. And you know, a lot of the times people will just come and buy it all out, and then by Tuesday I'm having to order from a different farm. So I guess in a roundabout way, it's really hard for me to like say like a small farm I would consider to be 1 acre, and a large farm I consider to be 300 acres. But it's really just about how often can you deliver to the store? How consistent is that one product or those multiple products that I always can count on being able to order that from you? Did that answer your question?
I got a question that just came in. And also I would like to say welcome to Penny. And if you don't mind, please mute your phone because we can hear some background noise, phone or computer, whatever you're using today. Chris is asking, how do you land a small or a large account? Or is this something that maybe you guys will get to later in the webinar?
Yeah, we are going to talk about that. We are going to get to that, Chris, for sure. Yeah, how to get started out on the relationship. We'll talk about that coming up. And I see another question here too. Would working with a farming cooperative be more appealing for consistency of product than working with individual small farmers?
Like a food hub? Or are you asking for us from a, okay. Yeah, I've worked with, what is that one? What's that food hub called? Puget Sound. I have worked with a food hub. Yeah. And they traveled south from up north. So they would buy, a lot of product from one farm that would then be distributed into places that those farmers weren't willing to go. Or able to go. So yeah, I would say if you have the opportunity and you're willing to explore that, then I would say that would be great. I loved working with the food hub. There was a lot of variety, and I also thought it was a great way to kind of support those really, really small farmers that could only do those, you know, that like one delivery on Mondays of, you know, 20 pounds of whatever black radish or something like that. So sure, yeah. I don't know that it would be more appealing or not, because then of course you're, you know, kind of dealing with pricing, and you have to stay in line with everybody else again, so you have less freedom, but sure.
Thanks, Shelby. So working with small versus large accounts for me as a farmer, I work with approximately 10 different accounts on a weekly basis during season. And every single one of them has a different way of working with me. So I have to keep it all in my head. I have to basically ditch my off-farm job during that time of year because some folks are going to do a phone call at 6:30 on Monday morning. Some are going to want an email on Wednesday afternoon. Some of them will just send me something in an email sporadically. And some people have to hustle more than others. So basically just bug them like, what are you going to buy? Do you want this? Do you want that? It seems to work fairly well. So what I do is I have 2 different fresh sheets. I have one for people that are going to buy 5 or less cases of one item. And I send that out on Sunday night. And then always Sunday night, because produce people start at what time, Shelby? Like midnight, 2 a.m., some early hour, 4 or 5 a.m. So I do it before I go to bed on Sunday night. Yeah.
It's very early.
And then I send out another availability list to my distributors, just of how much of the item that I have to sell to them. And there's no prices attached on that because I don't get to determine that. And so how do I get the order? It's all, and we're going to talk about this shortly about relationships. We're going to go deeper dive into it, but this also goes into that, is really have to nurture those relationships and be very, very communicative with people for success. So once I get the order, I put them all together for our harvest crew so they know when to harvest and when it needs to be ready. So some potential problems that come up with this is that, so for some of the smaller accounts, maybe they're only going to get, our smallest account might get 2 cases a week. Maybe they're going to get a case of carrots and a case of romaine lettuce. And then our larger accounts are going to get several pallets worth of something. And so how do you harvest for all of that, and how do you make it all work? The smaller accounts, although they're paying way more for the product, they're a lot of times for us, because we're used to doing wholesale, it's harder for us to do because you have to go to this part of the field and harvest 2 cases, this part of the field and harvest 1 case. And it's a little bit harder it's actually a lot harder for us than doing a whole pallet of one item. And then another thing that happens to us quite often is, what if if we have too much of a product, or if we under harvested a product. So maybe if we thought that I thought I had 5 cases of carrots available, but I only ended up having 3. Like, what do I do? And for me, and Shelby, you can tell me if this is or was helpful, is that I contact my buyer right away just to let them know, because I have no idea what repercussions those are going to have. So maybe the buyer's like, I don't care at all, it doesn't affect my life. Or somebody's like, thank you so much for telling me, because I was going to put that in my CSA and now I need to communicate that with my customers. So when somebody is short on an order, Shelby, what is helpful for you in dealing with that?
Oh, I think absolutely. The more communication, the better. Because if I was anticipating getting 4 cases of carrots from you the next day, and you're letting me know you won't have the product, then I need to call Charlie's, or I need to call OGC, or I need to contact a different farmer to see if they have any extra cases of carrots.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, especially if the item is like a high household penetration item, like carrots, then you're really going to need to have those on hand. If it was, 20 pounds of black radishes, I might be like, oh, cool, no big deal, just bring them to them the next time. I keep using black radishes because I really love black radishes. I'm just pointing that out. I just really love those, and I keep using them as an example, even though, like, more likely than not, nobody's going to be buying 50 pounds of black radishes twice a week. Sorry.
But you never know. I mean, I get asked to
true.
grow black radishes all the time, black radishes and watermelon radishes. So all you growers out there, there's a need for that, because I'm like, I cannot do that. That's what we're not good at. So. Yeah, so I think we should skip over the considerations for now and go straight to the relationships, because I think there's some interest here on how to just get started.
Sure.
Yeah, so how to get started with a relationship with a buyer. So Shelby, if you want to go first and just talk about it from either perspective that you want, or I can go first while you're waiting. It's okay.
I'm trying to think of how I formed relationships as a buyer, because the departments I was going to were already kind of pre-existing. But if I wanted to bring on another farmer, then I would send them an email and kind of let them know what I was looking for, and then it's a back and forth conversation about availability, pricing, when they can deliver, all of that stuff, and then eventually I like to ask for samples, because I think it's really amazing if a farmer is willing to, let you taste the product. It's not very common, if it's not a fruit item, that farmers are, bringing in a pound of black radishes for the buyer to taste. But I love that. And if a farmer is willing to do that, then that is like even more of a bond, because who doesn't like samples? Everybody loves samples. And I like to meet like face-to-face with farmers, because I think that's really important and fun for the relationship as well. And then not only both parties can kind of get a sense of like a little, feel each other out for what the relationship is going to look like. But also if the farmer comes to the buyer, then the farmer can see, oh, this is what their setup looks like. This is kind of what her vision is for produce displays. These are other farms that they work with. These are the pairings around this product. So a lot of the times I would also just get contacted. People would send me emails, give me a call and say like, I have 300 pounds of tomatoes. Can you buy them all? And then I was like, well, let's talk about pricing. And do you have any certifications or stuff like that? I also kind of try to send out at the end of the year, at the end of the season, like a thank you. I think that's really amazing because farmers work super hard to get the product to the customers. And I think a lot of the times it's not quite as, like, people don't shout about that enough. I mean, honestly, you can't really have one without the other, I think, in this setting, in a grocery store setting, at least. So I think having that symbiotic relationship is really important. And then for me as a farmer, I bring samples. I bring blueberries with me. That's an easy one though, because blueberries you can just pop right into your mouth and it's fruit, and people just eat them right out of hand. So like a carrot is a little bit different. But that's what I did with the pastry place. I'm trying to get into getting my blueberries into breweries. So I've been bringing my blueberries into like some breweries here and there to see if they might be willing to work with me to get some sort of like specialty blueberry beer or something like that. But yeah, that's just part of the marketing piece of having a farm, that you're trying to get yourself out there and you're trying to kind of make people look at you. I think people being really persistent is a really good idea too. Like if a farmer at one time I'm not able to buy their product, but they contact me again the next week or the week after that, like they're just like, buy my stuff. Then I'm just like, okay, fine. Like twist my arm. Let me buy your stuff. Let's see what it's like. So there's that kind of perspective as well.
Can I connect the dots a little bit on this black radish topic here?
Sure.
It seems like maybe for some of the smaller scale farmers, so I think of Chris, for example, who's only on a few acres, it's going to be really hard for someone like him to compete selling carrots or kale when there's big farms like 4 Elements Farm, which is still a small farm, but it's hard to match that volume. But maybe those specialty items that are on trend or unique that shoppers are going crazy for, small volumes of those, that might be something to focus on. Is that what you would think from the buyer's perspective, Shelby? It sounds like farmers coming in, giving you samples of unique produce, you might be more willing to work with someone who's a little small scale because it's such a unique item.
Yeah. I think that's a great question or thing to bring up. Absolutely. For sure.
Yeah, that could be a way to get in the door, so to speak. So I'll just kind of go over what I did in 2014 when we first started our farm. So we were just growing on 5 acres, and it's so tough the first year because you have no idea how much you're going to sell because you have nothing to base it on. And so I think, what I did is I started like Shelby just said, like, make sure that people know that I'm there, because people don't need me. Like, there's a lot of produce farmers and I am not really needed, and I wasn't needed. And so how do I get those sales? And it's just a lot of persistence. So we started off with, I think one of our first accounts was probably Marlene's Market. Go to the produce buyer there, and it may have been an email, but I think it's better just to go in there because just doing stuff from your computer, it's different. It's you need to just go in there and say, hey, where's your, can I speak with the produce person? And they'll come out and think you're a complaining customer probably. And then you just talk about your product. And I would usually take in with me a copy of my organic certification and a box of like 3 bunches of some things that I thought looked good at that time. And then, of course, they will never contact you again. And then you just follow up the next day. Did you look at that? How was it? Were you able to use it? This and that. and then they'll tell you something that may or may not be true. And then you just keep following. This is from the farmer perspective. And then I just keep following up, just persistence. So and then you get a kind of a feel for your buyer. Do they like to communicate over the phone? Do they like to do email? And so still to this day, I say at least half of the folks I work with are phone people. And then just go in there and that's how I hustled a lot of new accounts. The really small accounts that couldn't pick up, maybe they were far away. Like I had one account that took me an hour each way to drive to drop off. And I would do it for $50 every single Saturday. It would be my entire Saturday morning, and I would go there all the way there, drop off their $50 to $100 worth of stuff and come back. And I did that every single Saturday for the first 2 years we were in business. And now they come and pick it up from me because we got to a point where we weren't so strapped for cash, and I didn't really need that account anymore. Although it was important to us, we didn't need it for financial stability. And then they started coming and picking it up from us. But you have to prove that you're worth it first. I think that's a good way to get started. Yeah.
We've got a question from Chris. On the buyer side, what does wintertime buying locally look like? And I guess this is going to be very regional. Probably even Seattle area is going to be a lot different than North or South Dakota. Is it a wide market for small farmers like him? Is it storage crops, mostly like black radishes?
Yeah, totally. I will say that I think at some point farmers don't have a lot of the storage crops like onions, potatoes, anything like that. So at some point we do just end up switching more for the cold winter crops from a large wholesale distributor that are getting product from California or Canada, Mexico, stuff like that. So yeah, I think totally if you can grow it and it's in winter time, it's a storage crop, I think for sure there will probably be a buyer for it because they're more likely than not buying it from OGC or Charlie's or one of the big distributors, especially if you have it in large quantities.
And I will say typically this time of year and earlier, Chris, it's people just, my buyers, it's so easy to sell. I mean, right now it's different because everything's weird right now, but typically it's like, yeah, local stuff. Yeah, great. We'll just take it. It's really easy to sell in my perspective this time of year, as long as you have the relationship and the consistency.
So that's a potential niche to pursue if someone has their growing methods for winter crops down. That might be a wide open market that's less competition.
Right, and now would be a great time to start setting the stage. So, and this is another thing, how to get started with accounts is right now. Maybe you can con somebody into buying a case or 2 or 5 or 10 from you every now and then. Maybe it's not every week. You don't have that weekly sale, but every now and then maybe you'll make that drive up to Seattle and the Seattle traffic for that $200 sale or $100 sale. But then you're starting to build a relationship with that buyer. And so that when fall comes around, you can say, hey, I'm thinking of planting, or when August or whenever comes around, I'm thinking of planting black radishes for the winter or whatever. They'll know who you are, and you'll know, and you'll be able to build that relationship and say like, hey, yeah, he'll be like, yeah, well, I can buy 3 cases from you every week, and then you can plant for that. But now's the time to get started on those relationships. And that's kind of speaks to how to nurture the relationship. So you just keep it going. And really that's my only shtick, like just bombarding people, like just harassing them left and right. And I've never had anybody complain about it. I mean, if they don't like it, then they just won't respond ever. And then you'll know. But usually it works. I'd say 85% of the time it works. For my bigger account, for the Charlie's account, I'd say last year, 2019, was the first time that I gave them a fresh sheet and they just ordered off of it, that I didn't have to harass them. So it was like a solid 4 years of me sending several emails a day. And then if I didn't get a response, yes or no, like I'd call. And if they didn't pick up their desk phone, I'd call their cell phone. So it's like, and so finally, after 4 years, you know, it's become easier. But I do that with smaller buyers, absolutely, as well. And I think it's a good way to go, which is completely opposite from the way I've worked with my retail customers, the face-to-face people. It's just totally different. Yeah, and so how to get the most sales, again, just keep letting them know that you're there. You might be out in the field and you had a surprise crop, which happens when you get super busy, like, oh, wow, here's 14 cases of beans that I didn't know I had. And so you just call all the people right then and say, I got all these great beans, and just harass them until they buy something from you. I would say that's a pretty good way to go. And by harassing them, I want to be clear that I don't mean being rude or finding them on social media. Definitely never, ever, ever do that. Keep it professional for sure, but just contact them a lot. That'd be good. Anything to add to that, Shelby, from your perspective?
No. I think that's great. I guess the other thing I'll say too is customers will connect to your product more if they know what your story is, and that's being shoved down their throat. So for lack of a better term. So if you are being persistent with your buyer and you're like, buy these tomatoes, buy this black radish, here's the story of my farm, here's how I grew it, here's what it looks like, here's what you compare it with. Again, I'll reiterate the demo thing. Buyers love farmers coming into their departments or their stores or their event or their, whatever, and setting up shop and just kind of being the face of their product and being willing to chat with customers and telling their story to the face. Because again, it's brand recognition. So going to the outreach in terms of relationships, that's kind of part of it, is just being willing to kind of try to find time to demo and really sell your product to the customer. Because then, the next year you have that black radish, customers are going to be like, oh yeah, I remember Amy's black radishes. They're the best. She was here and she was so awesome to talk to. And I loved hearing about her farm. And now I just know that 4 Elements Farm black radishes are the best. And those are the ones that I want to buy. And I'm going to tell my friends, and my friends are going to tell their friends. And
can we talk about quality for a second? Because I think for a lot of smaller farmers, while of course everyone's trying to grow really high quality stuff, if you're at a farmer's market and you're talking to your end consumer personally, it's a little bit easier if carrots look a little funky, or maybe you got a little bit of flea beetle damage. But it seems unlikely to me that when you're doing distribution through wholesale channels, things are going to have to be pretty uniform.
Yeah, well, on the next slide is kind of what buyers are looking for. And one of them is quality product. It does look good. But I do think that from a cooperative perspective, people are not going to shy away from carrots that, have a hole in it, or that maybe they grew around, another root and they're twisted together. I think especially if the buyer is willing to tell the story, they're not going to shy away from product not being perfect, or those apples having that sheen, that wax around it. They're going to be like, no, this is what organic means. This is what that looks like. This is literally from hand to you. We just happen to be the middleman and we're putting it on our shelves. So that comes with education and telling the story behind what you want your customer to buy. Sometimes you will have
Shelby,
yeah,
go ahead.
No, please.
Well, you've mentioned telling the story several times. And so is this, you want to know the story as a buyer, or you want to have some materials and a story to pass on to your customer? What is that? How does somebody tell you the story? How do you find that out?
I would say all of the above, both the buyer and farmer kind of working together to put something together. At Central Co-op, we worked with a place called Billy's Gardens. He's in Tonasket, Washington, and we always bought his tomatoes every year. and we only carried Billy's tomatoes for the entire summer. But Billy and I worked together to get photos from that, accurate photos from that year. And then we would do like a social media push as a co-op that we had his tomatoes in, and our customers always got really excited when they got that email, or that they saw that picture and it was like, coming soon, Billy's tomatoes. So they got really excited about that. But that was both Billy and I working together to market for him. He never came in and did demos, but people just kind of had that same brand recognition every year, and they were always looking forward to his tomatoes because they were really good. They were the best tomatoes. But
Memorable.
I was gonna say about quality. There are some things like aphids. That's a hard no. So a buyer is probably going to return the product, or try to. And if that's going to be challenging, if the relationship between the buyer and the farmer is going to be a little bit, I don't know, not an easy conversation to have. Like that sucks. Somebody telling you that your product looks terrible is really hard to hear. And I can see that from both perspectives too. And it sucks, but it might happen, and you're just gonna have to prepare for that. But you might have a buyer return a product because of quality, and there are just some things that it's a hard no. You can't show up with your product like that, and that would be aphids on kale for sure is one. Holes in like kohlrabi greens, not a huge deal. I think a lot of folks understand stuff like that. Like that's kind of just part of that organic education to your customers. Misha, did that answer your question a little bit about the quality piece that you were referring to in terms of like, okay, cool.
Yeah, thanks.
Awesome. Yeah. So other things that buyers are looking for, consistency. And that kind of has a lot of layers too. So fresh sheets always on time. Just like what Amy was saying earlier about produce departments are starting super early in the morning because that's when the product is going to be the most fresh. That's when people are going to want to set it up looking really nice. So having fresh sheets on time, so that we don't have to bug you for your fresh sheets, which I have done before. And again, that's one of those things where if it happens, more than let's say 2 or 3 times, likely I'm going to move on to a different farm who is kind of bombarding me and really wants me to buy their product. Pricing consistency. Produce departments change their pricing every week, and that's based on the market. Some things might change a lot, but the least amount that it can change for the buyer is going to be the easiest, because then we're not having to focus on changing the price every week. Or Four Lemons Farm changed their price on carrots in the middle of the week. Now I have to change that price, which means I have to change my social media, which means I need to change the sign, which means I need to do all these other things. So pricing consistency is great. On a weekly basis, sure, maybe every other week, or really what works for you. But I think if you have to change your price multiple times a week, that's going to be challenging for a myriad of reasons. Consistency on quality of product as well, just as one. Competitive pricing, again, Amy mentioned earlier, kind of getting your elbow in with another buyer to see about what wholesale distributors are selling their product for, and trying to get your hands on that information, so that you can stay at least kind of in line, or asking your buyer, like, what are these going for? Hopefully, there's that honor system that your buyer is not going to lowball you. I think that's terrible, but I'm sure it does happen. And then reliability, showing up on time, delivering on time. If you are going to be late, calling and letting somebody know that, you're going to have to deliver a little bit later, which isn't always an issue, but sometimes if you're like, I can't deliver until 2 days from now, then the buyer is going to be like, oh, shoot, dang, well, I need to buy my product from a different farm. Yeah, so those are some things that buyers are looking for.
So this might be a good time to touch on standardization. So folks that aren't used to selling wholesale, if you say you buy some carrots from them for a 24 pack of carrots, and it's packed like something you've never seen before, like the 24 bunches of carrots in that box are packed in a different way than you've ever seen because the person didn't know the standardization. How is that going to work for you?
I mean, that's a great question. I think if I was expecting a 24 count carrot and I ended up getting 30, I mean, if the pricing was still the same, then I don't think I would be upset. Though if it was like a 24 count and I ended up getting like 18 and the pricing was still accurate, I mean, 6 bunches isn't really that big of a deal. So I'm maybe, yeah, I can't really see that being a problem. But
I didn't mean the number. I was more like how they are packed in the box. Like I know that there's a certain way that all the crops, like each crop has its own standard and it's packed a certain way in the box. So
I've seen it all, honestly. And
okay.
It's like,
that's good to know.
I think if you're looking at, let's say this picture, you have the kale and he's holding the butts of the kale. That's how somebody is going to pull it out of the box. So the easiest, when you're packing product, the easiest that you can make it for the person who's going to take it out of the box to put it on the shelf is probably the best. And really the way you're going to do that is kind of common sense. It's being like, okay, cool, I'm laying this kale on its side because somebody is going to be grabbing the bunches to put them on the shelf. If that kind of makes sense. But I mean, yeah. There's also like, you know, if you're just like throwing a bunch of apples or delicate product in a case, that's going to be a huge problem, especially if it's fragile, because it'll get bruised or it'll get damaged in some way. Or, you know, if you're packing like spinach bunches on the tops, then it's going to be all waterlogged and bruised up at the bottom, and same with herbs and stuff like that. So I guess it's just trial and error. The buyer is going to let you know if there's a problem.
Do different buyers and different wholesalers have any guidelines? So I imagine selling something to a central market or co-op is going to be a lot different than selling something to Charlie's, and Charlie's probably does have really pretty specific standardization expectations, whereas maybe a smaller grocery store might not. So Amy, can you talk about that? If you get guidance on what a case of carrots should look like, or what size bunches they should be, or like how you've got rubber bands around them, is that something that they want, or that's just what you do, that kind of stuff?
So yeah, there's definitely a standard, and we just do it the same way for every single account, because because it's just easier for our systems, and also so we don't get it wrong for the accounts that it does matter for. So I see your question, Monica. Are there resources for how to pack various veggies for wholesale in a standardized way? I do have some resources on that. I do have. So yes, the answer is yes for that. And I will get something to you. But honestly, we just know the standard because Augustine was the packing shed manager for the farm that we met at in like 2005, and they had high volume. And so he just knows how to, like, I cannot pack a box to save my life. Like, I'm just like, how do you fit them all in there? But yeah, there is a definite way, because when we've had some new employees and they've gotten it wrong, we absolutely hear about it. And I was surprised, Shelby, that you said you see different things coming in, because we're like, it has to be the same. So that was interesting to find out that it does vary some. So yeah. I kind of wanted to give folks a chance to ask questions. You don't have to type it. You can just talk if you want to. Just make space for that.
Venice is asking, do you brand your boxes?
I do not brand my boxes. For my wholesale, it's not important to me if people know that it comes from my farm. When we sell to Charlie's, we sell it under their brand. So as you can see in this picture, it's the twist tie is the Charlie's twist tie. It's their farmer's own brand. So, you know, you can't really tell the difference unless you see our label on the box, which we're required to put our own label on every box. And it's not a fancy label, Venice, like you guys have. It's just like, you know, something like, it's just something you can get at Home Depot and you can write on it or print it out. It just has to have your farm information on it. And so no, I don't brand my box. A lot of people do. I don't know if it helps sales or any, but I think for me, it's a personal preference thing. It's not my area of expertise. Like, I'm not good at design or any of that kind of thing. And, you know, if folks like Shelby or other buyers that want to hear the story, sometimes people will do stories about our farm, and they'll put our picture up in the stores, and that's awesome. And I love it, but I don't love it enough to try to figure out how to pay extra to get a box with my name on it, or twist ties for that matter. So, yeah.
So Venice is now asking, as a food producer, I buy from Charlie's and love it when I can trace back to the farm. So even a nice label is super helpful.
And so, Venice, when you buy a product, can you tell what farm it comes from?
Like you were saying, some, yeah. I just got a box of herbs that, like, I have to know. So when you're making a shelf stable product, you have to have like a lot number for all of your for every ingredient that you put in there. So even on the stuff that I grow on the farm, I have to produce some sort of a lot number. And so, for example, we just got a box of herbs from Charlie's, some of the stuff that's not in season for us yet. And it didn't have any identifying information, which was frustrating for me, because now I have to go back to Charlie's and ask for that kind of lot number or label. Also, I have certain standards that as a producer, I try to buy from the farm whenever possible, because I belong to some guilds that require that I know where I'm sourcing my product from, and it's beyond just the distributor. So then I have to go back and like try to track that information. So it is nice, like eat like lemons, for example, not something we grow here, something we put in our syrups. And so some lemons come from, you know, a cooperative. So I can only trace back to the cooperative. But then some have like an actual farm name on the box. And so I will actually request those lemons over another lemon, even if it's like a cooperative, just because then I can trace back to a single farm and I can tell that story to my customers, which helps my brand. And then it also does help your brand. I'm sure not everyone does it, but I think it's becoming more and more popular. And similarly, like you were saying, Shelby, I think it's interesting that like you guys, like a guy in a random part of Washington has built this brand around his tomatoes, and therefore you as a buyer are going out and sourcing his specific tomatoes and also promoting the heck out of his tomatoes because he's done a good job of not just growing something quality, but branding tomatoes, which I think a lot of times farmers don't necessarily think of, especially in the wholesale sense of like that branding is still important. And as a food producer, I really like it when a farm takes the extra time to like tell their story, but then also give me a way to track that story, because like I can easily then, if I know your farm name, look you up on Instagram, see if you have an Instagram, and then tag you when I post about the fact that like we care about where we're sourcing our product from, and like this is where our lemons come from. And so it's helpful for me.
I completely agree with that. And then too, with displays and stuff, as a buyer, if a box has branding on it, or your logo or something like that, and we have a bunch of your boxes, we're going to use those as case stacks, which is also another like brand recognition visual of customers being able to see that, oh yeah. And in Billy's case, he has these super, very colorful boxes that he uses for his tomatoes that make gorgeous case stacks. For displays, which can be really eye-catching, especially if your buyer does really well with big displays for local products or products in general.
I have a clarifying question on that, because that's for Shelby, you're talking about a direct relationship with a farmer. Denise is talking about buying through a distributor, and what Amy mentioned earlier about someone like Charlie's is they don't really want I don't think that they necessarily really want the farmer and the end user to build any kind of relationship because they don't want to get cut out. And so Amy, even if you had branded boxes, would anyone past Charlie's even see that?
Yeah, I mean, most of the stuff we sell to Charlie's, we sell through their Farmer's Own. So we are required to put a label on it. So they will see that, but it's just a sticker that we stick on every box. And so they will see it, but we are required to use their boxes with their logos and that kind of thing. And Shelby, when you have that nice packaging, do they get better prices? Like if you had the tomatoes and you're going to say, I'm going to pay $50 for this flat of tomatoes. Will you pay $55 if the packaging was super nice, like the colorful packaging that you mentioned, or is it going to be the same no matter what?
I mean, it's been the same no matter what from my perspective, but if a farmer approached me about having better packaging and wanting to charge a different price, I'd be willing to explore that, especially if it was something that I know my customers really love and will buy. Yeah.
So Amy, when you are selling to someone other than Charlie's, you're putting them in boxes. You don't use the Charlie's twist tie then?
No.
You use your own, or?
No, we just use like a generic twist tie. We get all of our packaging stuff from Market Supply, so it'll just say organically grown. We just use the organically grown twist ties, and then the box is again a generic one. It says Northwest Produce on it. Yeah. And then we put the sticker label on it. We put the same label on every single box, regardless of who it's going to. Yeah. We have a question from Claudia. So you're selling to restaurants. I usually sell for retail store price minus 1/3. Was visiting with another farmer who sometimes gets retail price selling to restaurants. Is there a percentage off of retail that you use as a standard for restaurants? Do you sell to restaurants, Shelby?
They don't.
I think volume kind of question, right? Because so I don't do produce, I do meat, but for me, I'm going to try to get as close to retail pricing as I can, just because I'm not in the wholesale market, and the restaurants that I'm buying or selling to are using my item as a specialty item, and so they're willing to pay a little bit more. But it depends on the size of the restaurant and how much they're ordering from you and how often they're ordering from you, right? Or if your neighbor farmer is selling the same thing that you are for that wholesale price and you go in asking for retail, they're always going to go. The margins on restaurants are very, very low. So they're always going to go for a lower price. Not always, like there are some really great farm to table restaurants out there, but you'll know that, and they won't ask you for rock bottom prices. But most of the time they have very low margins.
Yeah, and sometimes I've worked with some fairly small restaurants that'll ask for like some special treatment, like, can I just get 6 bunches of this and 12 bunches of this, something that's not a standard case pack, and I would definitely charge full price, retail price for that kind of thing, because it just takes an extra amount of work to do that. Yeah, and as Liz just said, that you can probably justify your prices to non-chain restaurants more easily, and I will expand that to just be the size of a restaurant too, because I've worked with some non-chain restaurants, farm-to-table restaurants that are fairly larger in size, and they're able to get a lot of volume, and so I won't adjust the prices. But the small restaurants that you have to, deliver between 2 and 2:30 on Tuesday, yeah, definitely full price on that. And so Vinny says that I think it would be where having a price sheet from local distributors would help, because if they don't get it from you, that's where they'll get it, unless it's so specialty that they can't get it from them. So it would be helpful. So you're saying that it would be helpful for the farmer to have the price sheet from the distributor?
Yeah, that's what you're saying. Where like, if you can get your hand on the distributor price sheet, like can you get your hand on Charlie's price sheet for the week? Because then you know that they're not buying it from you. That's probably where they're buying it from, or whatever distributor they use. And so you basically
I'm gonna talk to you after this.
I think a lot of it goes back to that relationship building. So the restaurants that we've worked with for my farm, the reason they even want to buy from us is because of who we are and what we do and how we raise our livestock. And so restaurants that are worth pursuing for relatively small scale farmers, typically they are putting the name of their farm on their menu and they're highlighting the fact that they're buying from you versus just trying to get the cheapest produce, because they will always just go to a major distributor if that's what they're looking for. So if they're even interested in working with you at all, I would really try and build a good relationship with that chef. Chefs are like really, really tricky to track down and pick down. A lot of them require or request text messages for fresh sheets and things like that because they're not sitting at a computer ever. And so it's just a kind of different relationship building, but it does go back to that relationship for sure.
I'll touch on how to plan for the production. So the very first thing that has to happen is not what you want to grow, or it's what you can sell. So the very first part of my planting plan every year has nothing to do with seeds. It's the marketing plan. So I list out all of my accounts that I have, and I have conversations with every single one of those folks. And we have a conversation, how many cases of this product can you have a week? And then most of my buyers will say, what can you grow? What can you do? And then maybe they'll have a hole somewhere where somebody got out of the business or something. And hey, can you pick up this crop or not? But offer what you grow well, not what they ask you to do, because that's definitely a pitfall, because some folks are going to ask you to do some crazy thing, like, for me, crazy thing like, oh, can you do broccolini? I'm like, yeah, because the harvest window is like, 10 minutes on that. I always say no to that, but at the very beginning, it's really hard to say no because you just want to get that sale. But marketing plan first, so you don't plant anything that's not already sold. Basically, that's a good. It's a good rule to live by. So especially in the winter time of year and you're going through those seed catalogs and you think it's a great idea to do these crazy crops and it looks super fun, just don't do it. You're gonna spend a lot of time and labor on supplies that you won't be able to sell.
So no black radishes, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, like black radishes. Like, yes, I definitely want to make money in December, but no, I won't do it. So, because I know I can't do it well. It's not my area of expertise. And then just make your planting plan out of that. Everybody makes their planting plan differently, and we could do a whole nother workshop on that. But next, go through supplies. What do you need to purchase? It's going to be totally different from what you, not totally, but there's going to be some different things that you're going to need for wholesale that you don't need for direct market. So go through your day, like go through it in your head. Like if I'm going to up something from harvesting 20 heads of lettuce to harvesting 200 heads of lettuce or 1,000 heads of lettuce, what are my systems going to be like? What am I going to harvest them into? Do I need to buy something else or get some other harvest bin? How am I going to carry them? Am I going to carry them on my feet back and forth to the packing shed? Am I going to use a cart? Am I going to use a tractor and pull behind trailer? Am I going to use, some pick truck or quad or whatever? So it's all about systems, and wholesaling is all about efficiency. So you have to always be thinking one step ahead. So that goes for the planning in the wintertime and the springtime to your daily task. So, your day, of course, no matter what kind of farming you're doing, never goes as planned, but you always have to be thinking 1, 2, 3 steps ahead, especially with wholesaling, because if you're not efficient, it'll never pencil out, ever. because you are selling at a much lower cost than you would be direct market at a farmer's market or something like that. So, just real simple things to think about. Harvest knives, make sure you know where they are, how many you have, and when you're cutting something and maybe you have to put a twist tie on it, what are you going to do with that harvest knife? So are people going to have sheaths? Do you have what's the method? Because you don't want people to, or yourself to put down the harvest knife, then make the twist tie, and then have to pick up the harvest knife every single time. That's super inefficient, and it's going to make it's just not going to work out to do volume that way. Have your twist ties, same thing with your twist tie. What's your method going to be? What's going to work for you, or your rubber band, or however you make the bunches. You don't want to have to go and pick one up from the side somewhere every time. They need to be on your body somewhere. And how are you going to make that happen? Have your boxes ready. Butcher paper for wholesalers. We always put butcher paper on top of every single case. We get complaints when we don't. Shelby, I don't know if you've always needed that, but we have to have an ice machine because we have to put ice on top of everything, or most things. And then how are you going to move stuff around your farm? So you have, 50 boxes of something. How are you going to get that from point A to point B without having to schlep them, one at a time? So pallets, you can find pallets. They're easy to come by. And then of course, you're going to need a pallet jack. So again, it's just about systems and organization. Every single farm and every single farm system is going to be different, and you have to find out what works for you, and you have to think hard about it, because that is the key that makes all of the wholesale system work. Because if you don't have efficiency, it just doesn't work. And then I'll talk a little bit about labor. Again, I want to emphasize that this is just my personal experience on the farms that I've worked at. And I also want to emphasize that when I've worked for wholesale, all the farms I've worked with have been wholesale farms for the most part, except for when I worked with Shelby at Terry's Berries, and that was my one direct market farm that I worked at, and it was so completely different. Everything about it was different. And I'm so happy that I had that experience, because I learned just how different things are. And so that goes in with the labor. So the folks, when you're doing direct market, you don't have to be as efficient. You don't have to keep that math in your head. You don't have to know how many bunches are people doing per minute, or how many bunches do you need to do per minute to make things pencil out. So we don't do bunches per minute. We do cases per hour, or cases per day. So sometimes we'll have 400 cases of kale in the field, and I'll talk to Augustine, and he's like, we don't have a good crew right now, so I can only do 100 cases per day. That's how many that we can do from start to finish. So don't sell any more than that. And that goes with labor. So is your labor skilled? Are they new? Are they just getting into farming because they're maybe college students, or younger folks that are really interested in food systems and wanting to learn about it? Or are they folks that have been farming for a long time, or doing similar work? And so it also depends on what scale of wholesaling you're going to do. So it's just different. You have to be able to be standardized. You have to have people that are willing to trust you, and you have to have a good relationship with your crew so that you don't have people questioning you constantly. We've had a lot of problems with that as well, and it just doesn't work out, because it doesn't work out for us as a wholesale farm, for the people that want to learn about food systems and kind of live off the land and learn about growing their own food. Those people end up not being very happy with the situation, because it's fast paced. It's really fast paced. And so just want to kind of highlight the realities of that situation. And there was some generalities in there. So, of course, there's exceptions to everything. Do you have anything to add to that, Shelby?
No, actually, I think you spoke to that beautifully. My operation is quite different than yours. It's only blueberries, and I mean, I'm kind of right in that boat with Augustine. Only that's kind of my every day for the whole summer is just how many pickers are out there and how much can they harvest. And then when I'm in the shed processing the product for it to go into the freezer, it's kind of the same thing. How many people do I have, and how many cases can we just be running through and get into freezers? So yeah, no, totally. I think you spoke to that really nicely. I think that's pretty universal in that regard. Just how fast can you get things done?
Yeah, it's all about efficiency. Again, it all comes back to that. Does anybody want to talk anything about labor? Want to give a chance for people to ask questions about that? All right.
Got about 20 minutes
Bye,
left.
Claudia.
Slot, but yeah, people are starting to leave, so maybe
Okay.
I'll wrap it up a little bit.
Yeah, sure. So considerations in general, I would say when thinking about doing wholesaling, you know, I've heard of, during the introduction, many of you said you're trying to explore a different sales avenue, or because of what's going on right now at present, covering your basis and risk management. And I've done the same thing. I did the same thing trying to get out of wholesale. So last year was our year that we're like, okay, let's tone down the wholesale and let's ramp up the retail side of things because of labor. We were having really hard time finding skilled folks that could do wholesale work. And then what we found was that we're not good at that. That's not what we're good at. It's not what we enjoy doing, which is probably why we're not good at it. And so we weren't successful at it. So I think that the main thing you want to do before you go head first into wholesaling is, do you really want to do that? And that kind of goes with the pros and cons, because when you wholesaling, you're not really working with your end customer. And if that's really important to you, that's something you're really going to want to consider. I'm not really good at interacting with the general public. I love it, and it's one of the bittersweet moments of me not doing a CSA anymore, because that was awesome, and I actually really love it, but I'm not good at it. I just don't have a personality that's, you know, that's lovable to the general public and people want to buy stuff from. And I like, you know, when the box thing, I don't want to make pretty boxes, and I don't want to make it look pretty to people, and so not good at that. But dealing with the wholesale buyer, I like the game. I love it. It's a fast-paced game. It's kind of like, I feel like a rush of energy when somebody buys something that I was really, you know, not intending to sell, and they bought it anyway. It's great. So just, I would say, just really think hard about what it means to wholesale versus direct market. Pencil it out financially, and after you make your financial decision, just make sure it's what you want for your farm, and if that's the direction that you want to go, because it's a big decision. And I think it's really important to say, especially because a lot of us are doing farming for a lot of different reasons, but if your farm isn't financially sustainable, then you don't have a farm. So you have to just make sure that's one of the first considerations that you make. So Shelby, what are your closing thoughts there?
Well, I do both direct to customers and wholesaling. Of course, my wholesaling is a little bit different than yours. And it's just, I love hearing about your take on wholesaling and kind of why you guys went in that direction. That's I just love that. I really like the part of my farm with the direct, making things free for people and getting to know what people are going to use the berries for. I think that's really fun. That said, I also really, really enjoy moving a lot of product, thousands of pounds of blueberries in one delivery. So there's that too, just because not only is that better just for efficiency's sake, I'm not holding on to a lot of product. I can fill my freezers with new stuff, but it's that time sensitivity thing too, where I'm not holding on to that product. So there's just that reiteration of getting things moving out of the door, and wholesale accounts are going to help you do that. I think without the wholesale portion of my farm and my job, I don't think that I would be able to have those relationships with my customers otherwise, because they move a lot of product, and it's high volume, and that's kind of my bread and butter right now is the wholesale. So I'm trying to grow both sides of that, honestly, but I'm kind of exploring all the avenues. This has also been really fun for my learning, as well, as I am in my this will be my 6th year of owning the farm, and I'm also excited to think about these and kind of percolate on the things that you said today, Amy, and how I can implement some of the stuff on my farm as well. So I presented on some stuff, and I learned a lot as well.
We've got some questions coming in the chat box. So before we go, Liz Clark asked that we talk about certifications and regulations, which you have on your slide for wholesale. And then Emily is asking if you charge a delivery fee or if you build that into your price.
Amy, I'm not. You can take on the certifications required for wholesaling if you like.
Okay. Yeah, sure. So Liz, we do have GAP certification, and we're required to do a $5 million. Our biggest request or requirement is a $5 million liability for insurance. Some folks only require 2, but we have to have 5. And I'm not sure what exactly about the GAP certification to talk about, but I will say, and feel free to ask something more specific, Liz, but GAPs, I mean, it gets a bad rap, but it's really not hard. It's not hard at all. It's super easy to implement at a small scale. I feel like the only pain point for GAP certification is the cost of it. It costs a lot, and it's painful how much it costs, but we have to have it, so we just do it. It's super easy to implement. It's basically just stuff we're already doing anyway, but we just need to then write it down that we're actually doing it. So
does everyone?
That's an easy one.
I'm guessing maybe Charlie's requires it of you, but if someone is looking just to maybe sell to a few grocery stores here and there, not all of them require this, right? It's kind of, I was just at the meeting for the farm to school that Chris was on that. Anyway, it sounded like some schools really require it, other schools are gonna make an exception, and so that there might be some wiggle room on the certifications depending on who you're selling to.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's not a mandated governmental regulation at all. So our big wholesalers require what? Our big wholesalers require it, but no one else does. I'll put it that way. Yeah. So you most likely a lot of folks won't even need to have that at all. Organic certification is something that everybody that we sell to needs, but that might not always be the case for everyone. Are we all frozen, or is it just me?
I'm not frozen.
Okay.
Oh.
Okay, I think we're good.
Did we lose Misha?
Okay, so do we charge a delivery fee or built into the price? That's kind of a hard one. So the things that are harder to deliver, so when we go up to Seattle, I didn't charge a delivery fee, but I did have a minimum order. So I said, I forgot what it was. I want to say it was $500.
I think that's right. That rings true.
Yeah. So it's like, I need you to order $500 for me to go up there. I had an account in Gig Harbor that cost $6 to cross the bridge. And when they would have low volumes, I would just put that as a line item. But I could have just built it into the price. I just wanted to be upfront with them about it. Like, I want you to pay for my bridge fee. So, but I don't think it's out of the question to do that. I think that I've definitely considered it and probably should do it more. What do you think about delivery fees, Shelby?
From a buyer standpoint, I think having a minimum order is probably your best bet, because the buyer is going to have to put in that delivery fee into the price of the product that they're selling to the customer anyway. So if you can build it into the price, that's best. Or if you have a minimum order, that's going to be really great too. I will deliver to places, and I don't have, like to grocery stores or the farms or the pastry place in Seattle, I don't have a minimum order or a delivery fee, but that's just because it's just me doing it, and I just use my car. So it's really just wear and tear on my vehicle and gas. But I guess for me, at the end of the day, it's my larger account, and I know they're going to keep buying from me. And if I, make that one little sacrifice, it's not going to be like a bank breaker or whatever, and it's really helpful for them. If I deliver to somebody's home, which I do in the summertime or in the winter months, I do charge a delivery fee because they're not buying a huge amount of product, and they're probably way out of my way to deliver. So it becomes more of an inconvenience at that point. But I do offer that because I want people to have my product. And if they can't make it out to Algona and they want me to deliver to, well, I don't know, Chehalis, then I'm just like, yeah, totes, but it'll cost you, $20. And sometimes, people want to haggle with that too. So you could always kind of start with something, and then, if the person has like the opposite reaction you were hoping for, or wants to talk to you more about it, then that would be kind of building into that relationship with your buyer piece, kind of what works best for both parties.
Cool. Thanks, Shelby.
Yeah.
Okay. Any last questions folks have? Okay. Well, thank you for joining us today. Misha got booted off. She had some technical difficulties there. She may be back, but we have recorded this, and we're going to put it up on the PCC Fresh YouTube channel. And so we'll be getting in touch about that. So thank you all, and feel free to reach out to me after this privately if you have any other questions. And Misha, were you there? Did you just say something? No. Okay. Okay. Well, have a great night and stay well, everyone.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.